Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Tzadik Tes Amud Aleph, starting with Daf Tzadik Ches Amud Beis, 19 lines from the bottom, 1/3 up from the bottom of the Amud. We're in the middle of the Mishnah. The Mishnah, which is a lengthy Mishnah, is broken up into two different parts. The first part of the Mishnah discusses 4 different scenarios when the Korban Pesach is lost from the Chabura. The second part of the Mishnah now discusses when you have 2 different Chaburas or 2 different individuals who then had their Korban Pesach which was mixed with the other one. They're not sure which is their Korban Pesach. Says the Mishnah, Shtei Chaburoi shenisarvu Psachim, where there are 2 groups, Group A and Group B, and their Korban Pesach got mixed together. They don't know which is their seh, or which is their lamb. Eilu moishchin lahen echad ve'eilu moishchin lahen echad. So each one takes a lamb, not knowing if it's his or not. Echad me'eilu ba loy eitzel elu, ve'echad me'eilu ba loy eitzel me'elu. One of the members of the first Chabura A, goes to Chabura B, and one of the members of Chabura B goes to Chabura A. Ve'kach heim omrim. And therefore, the Chabura A says to the individual who just came from Chabura B, Im shelonu hu ha-Pesach hazeh, if this Pesach belongs to us, it's our lamb, then yadecha mishuchos mishelcho v'nimnis al shelonu. Then your hand should then be retracted from your Korban Pesach and be included in ours. In other words, yours should be divested from that and should be included in ours. V'im shelchohu ha-Pesach hazeh, yadeinu mishuchos mishelonu v'nimninu al shelcho. And vice versa. If indeed it's your Korban Pesach, then our hands should be drawn away from ours, and should be included in yours. V'chein, the Mishnah goes on to say, Chamesh chaburot shel chamisha chamisha, v'shel asara asara, if you have 5 groups of 5 individual each, or 10 groups of 10 individual each. So let's say you have the 5 groups of 5 individual each. What we're saying is that each group then keeps one of the 5 and then sends out the other 4 to be dispersed amongst the other groups. And that's with each of the 5 groups. So each one goes to the other one, and now that forms 5 new groups, which each group has an original owner. So the Mishnah goes on to say, Moishchin lahen echad mikol chabur v'chabura. Each one takes a lamb. So you have 5 different groups, and each group now has a lamb in its group. V'chein heim oimrim, and similarly they say the same thing that was said before. That each one is going to then say to the rest of the group, one will say to the other 4, that if this lamb belongs to you, then I will be moshech my yadayim and be included in yours. And if indeed it belongs to me, you'll be moshech your yadayim and be included in mine. And each one will then say that to the other. Each one will rotate within the group and say that declaration to the other 4. Now the Mishnah goes on to speak about individuals whose Korban Pesach gets mixed up with each other. Shnaim shenisarvu Psachim. There are 2 individuals who had a lamb that was designated for Korban Pesach, and they got mixed up. They don't know which lamb belongs to who. Zeh moishech loy echad v'zeh moishech loy echad. Each one takes a lamb. Zeh mimane imoy achas min hashuk v'zeh mimane imoy achas min hashuk. Each one takes an individual from the shuk, and he then is memane that individual on his original korban. And zeh ba'etzel zeh v'zeh ba'etzel zeh. This one comes to the other one. That means that the original owner of, let's say, Reuven, he goes to the other fellow's Korban Pesach, the other fellow's lamb, who and then took somebody from the shuk, and he goes in front of that fellow from the shuk and says to him the following, Kach heim amrim. They say, He'im sheli hu Pesach zeh, if this is my Pesach, Yadecha meshuchos mishelcha v'nimnis al sheli. Then your hands are withdrawn from yours, and you'll then be included in mine. V'im shelchohu Pesach zeh, but however it is your Korban Pesach, yadi meshuchas mishali v'nimnesi al shelcha. Then my hands will be withdrawn from mine, I'll be included in yours. Now, why is it that the cases have to be that the individuals have to then bring somebody from the shuk? And why did we say before, when it came to the case, when you had the chaburos, that they had to then send one individual to the other chabura? Why couldn't each chabur just say the declaration to the other chabura? Or why couldn't this individual make the declaration to the other individual? Why did they have to bring a person from the shuk? And why in the previous case did they have to then send an individual from his chabura to the other chabura, and they had to make the declaration? But the answer is because if they would not do that, then there would be a period of time without an owner of the Korban Pesach, and that would poisel the Korban Pesach. So at every point in time, there must be an owner. The Gemara now brings the following brisa. This brisa is going back on the original cases in the Mishnah. Again, the Mishnah the first half of the Mishnah speaks about a chabura who lost its Korban Pesach. So it brought 4 different scenarios. The Gemara now hones in on the 3rd and 4th scenario. Tanu Rabbanim. The brisa states, Omar lohen va'amru loy. In the 3rd scenario, so one of the Bnei Chabura, he goes to find the lost Korban Pesach, and they say to him that if you find that Korban Pesach, shecht it on our behalf. In other words, they are memanehim a shliach. And he's Omar lehen. He also says to them that indeed, if I'm coming late, then also they include me in your chabura, that when you shecht the Korban Pesach, it should be including me as well. So the din is oichel min harishon, whichever one is shechted first, then that's the one that they both partake in, whereas the other lamb has to be sent to the Beis HaSreifa. Loy amar lehem v'loy amu loy. But in the 4th scenario, it says that neither one was mana the other one a shliach. The individual did not memane them, the best of the chabura shliach, and they did not memane him to be a shliach on their behalf. So the din is, einan achroin zelazeh. Neither one has responsibility for the other one, and therefore, whenever the individual finds the lost Korban Pesach and shechts it, it's going to be his, and he'll be able to be oichel it. Whereas the rest of the group, whenever they go ahead on their timetable, are shechting a Korban Pesach, it will be theirs. It's in the independent Korban Pesach, where each one does not affect the other one. We're on top of Tzadik Tes Amud Aleph. From here, the Gemara makes the following observation. Mikan Amru Chachamim. From here, the sages had said, Yafe shtika lachachamim, kal v'chaymer letipshim. Great is the shtika, the silence of the wise, and how much more so for the foolish. Shneimar says in the pasuk, Evil macharish chacham yechoshev. The fool who is silent, he's considered to be a chacham. So here we see that if the fact that when each one was memane the other as shaliach, so each one becomes dependent on the other one, whereby ultimately only the first Korban Pesach that shechted is valid, and the other one has to be then sent off to the Beis HaSreifa. That's in a case where they both then open their mouths, so to speak, and were memane a shlichus. But in the latter scenario, where they were both silent, then it comes out that it's independent, and each one at their timetable can shech the Korban Pesach, whereby each one fulfills the Korban Pesach and can also consume it, without neither one having been sent to the Beis HaSreifa. So that's a fulfillment of this statement, Yafe shtika lachachamim kavachayim letipshim. The Gemara now brings the Mishnah that stated, Shnayim shenis aru pischeim. When you have 2 individuals who are not sure which lamb belongs to them, the Mishnah states that each one take somebody from the shuk and include them in their chabura. Then the original owner goes to the other fellow, the one who he included from the shuk, and he goes in front of the fellow from the shuk, the newcomer, and he then tells them the declaration, if this Pesach belongs to me, then you will then withdraw your hands from the Korban Pesach and it will be included in mine, and if it's yours, then I'll withdraw my hands and be included in yours. The Gemara points out, let us say, therefore, our Mishnah that's talking about having to include somebody from the shuk must not be like Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda requires that there always be at least an original owner included in the chabura. And if you bring somebody from the shuk, then it can be then that person from the shuk will be the owner at the time when he is not the original owner. The Tanya, where do we see that Rabbi Yehuda requires that you have an original owner? As follows, it says in the Apostle, Ve'im yimat habayis miyos miseh. From here the Gemara darshans, Rab Melamed shehamismatin veholchin ubilvad sheyecha b'bnei chabura kayim di Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you can go ahead and diminish the amount of people that are included in the chabura, providing that you remain with at least one original owner. Amar Rabbi Yossi Omar ubilvad shelo yaniach es hapesach kamoshu. Rabbi Yossi argues says, no, you don't have to be so strict, providing that you have at least somebody that is currently an owner. It doesn't have to be the original owner. Al Kolpanim, you see from this brisa that Rabbi Yehuda requires the original owner, at least one original owner of the Korban Pesach, of the Chabura. And yet, again, in our Mishnah, we're talking about bringing somebody from the Shuk who's not an original owner. Rabbi Yochanan said, Afilu Tema Rabbi Yehuda. You can even say that the Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yehuda. How? Kivan the Rabbi Yehuda ain't sheichtin as a Pesach al yochid. We learned Daf Tzadik Aleph that Rabbi Yehuda requires that you have at least two or more that you're shechting Korban Pesach for. You're not allowed to shech the Korban Pesach for an individual. So therefore, there's never a situation when over here they were truly individuals. It's true Reuven had his lamb and Shimon had his lamb and they got mixed up. But never they were going to remain an individual because you couldn't shech the Korban Pesach for just Reuven or for just Shimon, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Therefore, they always had to then include somebody else, whereby when they included the person from the shuk, he was considered to be an original component, original owner of this Korban Pesach, as follows. Originally, when they were memanes somebody else, he was together with them. He's like one of the Bnei Chabura. So therefore, the one came from the Shuk was not now a newcomer, so to speak. He was somebody who was really considered to be part of the original Chabura. Rav Ashi said, you can even medayik the Mishnah to prove that indeed the Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yehuda. For it's taught in the Mishnah, V'chein chamesh chaburois shel chamisha. And similarly, there are 5 groups or 5 individuals. That's the case that the Mishnah had brought. And again, we spoke out that each of the 5 chaburos who have 5 individuals, so one person remains in each group. The other 4 break out into other groups, and that happens with all of the groups, forming 5 new groups with one original owner. So the Gemara points out, Chamisha shel chamisha in, aval shel chamisha va'arba loy. Dafka 5 groups of 5. But if it would be 4 groups of 5 and 1 group of 4, loy, that would not be satisfactory. And that's why the Mishnah did not bring that case, but specifically brought the case of 5 groups of 5. La mishum, is it not because the loy fayish chad mimnei chabura gabe, is it not because that you didn't want to be left without one of the chabura, that you wanted to have an original owner of the chabura, as Rabbi Yehuda requires? Shmamin, indeed, we can prove from here that the Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yehuda. Hadron aloch mishahaya tameh, v'slika lo pesach sheni. We learned that the Gaonim explain why the Masechet is called Maseches Psachim in plural, not just Maseches Pesach, because the first chelik of Maseches Psachim, Aleph, Perak Aleph through Dalid, including Perak Yud, deals with Chametz, Matzah, and Moror, whereas Perak Hey through Perak Tes, those 5 prokim that we just finished, those specifically deal with Korban Pesach, another inyan of Pesach. There's 2 Pesachim, and therefore Hadron Aloch Misha Hayatame Veslika La Pesach Sheni.